With this watercolour of conifers in the background, I've added a few tops of trees and left the masking fluid on. That's important. Left the masking fluid on here. Because the masking fluid is in place, and I'll only, if I paint the trunks of the trees in, I'll only see glimpses. So what I was hoping to do is mix up a dark brown red or brown grey sort of colour with ochre, ultramarine and crimson, and paint into the branches, and the only part that's going to be visible will be the little gaps left by the masking fluid. So the branches should, in theory, be in front of these conifers. If this all works. So that's brush control, the angle of the brush. What I'm hoping is that by holding the brush upright, you'll get better contact with the paper. Clump of the tree there, this main tree. And it really does depend on where the masking fluid has gone to achieve this. So there are a few branches there. Oops. Something there. Thinner branches. I'm going to leave that to dry 100% before lifting the masking fluid. So again, leaving the masking fluid in place, I'm going to blur with a damp hake brush just along this back edge here. Leave that a little bit damp and come in with a mix of blues, cerulean and ultramarine. Just sort of fade that back into the trees behind. Let's go over the rocks. They are darker, so that'll be possible to add them later. Just blur that edge. A little bit of blue across here and through here. There is a fern here, and it could either be masked or it could be painted around, possibly, by leaving out. So that's a method where you just paint into the negative shapes and sort of overhangs a little bit. So that's quite an old-fashioned way of working in watercolour, to paint into the gaps around something rather than painting the actual thing, painting in reverse in effect. There's another. I'm just going to come down to the edge of the rocks. Try and use a bit of leaving out. So that should be a bit of a lost edge there. These rocks are darker anyway, so let's go back and have a look at the rest of this. I like to try and use some dry brush here. Dry brush is where the brush just sort of skips over the surface of the paper and doesn't go into all the little pockets in the paper. So that's dry brush along that edge. Meant to be fairly fast flowing water, this, so Again, a little bit of sparkle on the water through dry brush. It's with the brush held at a very shallow angle. Let's come over here a bit. Again, cerulean blue, a little bit of ultramarine. Dry brush doesn't mean that the brush is dry, literally, it just means the contact is fairly limited with the paper. So that's again another dry brush edge along the base of this bit of white water. Possibly could be other layers on here. So I'm going to brush this bit in with some blue and I'm going to try and blend it with. I think where you get these little gaps occurring, that's very characteristic of the sparkle on water. So that they would be useful. We try and leave those little gaps in place. So there's a little bit of ochre brown coming into the water here on the left. It's a reflection of that tree above. Again, I'm going to leave some gaps. You leave these little gaps of light. Put some blue into there. Then change the angle of the brush. This is a sharp edge. A little bit more blue in the foreground. So that's an exaggeration really of the movement in the water, and I think that's what painting can be. It's a bit of an exaggeration sometimes. And so the last little bit here would be this bit of water here. Try and give that a blurred edge against what lies behind, somewhere there. Just going to work around this figure a little bit, and then come down to what I was hoping would be a hard edge. So I'll try that edge against these rocks. So, but being in the middle distance, these would be a little sharper in focus. That would mean harder edges. And these rocks have got a bit of light on them. Come up to about there somewhere. Just blur those other edges. A little bit of water there, and I'm going to create water, a little bit of a gap there. Try and lose that edge. So generally watercolour is a process of painting where darker colours are added progressively, and to underpaint this area I've mixed up a little ochre and crimson to make a golden yellow colour, something like that, and golden yellow, and that would mean going into these. There's a little bit of warm colour among these rocks here. And as that's in the foreground, or not quite the foreground, but the middle distance, I'm going to give this a little warmth as well, just by adding water and providing a little warmer key to subsequent layers of colour. So all of this is slightly warmed up. There are grasses above there that I can't quite paint in yet because that's all still wet. So there is light in here, bright light on some of these rocks, which would go back to almost to white paper. That's just to try and give this a little warmth. there, for example. So it's damp, the surface is damp, and that means that colour is blurring and running a little bit. That just provides a warm key to this area in the middle distance. And the figure, I've got to wait for this to dry either side. Before I do that, I'm going to put some other layers on top of here. And I'd like to try and put a light wash underneath this. I need a little more information. I've got to wait for this to dry before doing any more to it.